The rise of technology and its use has been juxtaposed with the COVID-19 physical distancing measures. They've led to increased digital and social engagement. Now, some people describe online as the new backyard as well as the office. But time to discuss some of these ramifications with Carla Moore, who's a lecturer, Gender and Development Studies, UWI Mona, as well as Amilcar Sanatan. And Amilcar is an artist, academic, and activist. He's also a PhD candidate in cultural studies at the St. Augustine campus. No, we say good afternoon, or rather good evening, Carla. Good evening, Amilcar. How are you?
Good evening. I'm very well.
Now, I want us to start from a point of stating where we are. So, can you articulate? I'll start with you, please, Carla. What is your current use of digital platforms? And this is in any role of those spheres that you encompass.
I use digital platforms. I use it for work in all of its senses. So I am the artist, academic, and activist, and I'm also an alchemist. So I use my digital platforms for blogging and vlogging. I create content which I upload. I also use my digital platforms to create healing spaces, so workshops. I have a TV show, and I use the digital platform for business because I actually have a business that sells products. And then in the latter part of, or I guess in the earlier parts of COVID, I started using the digital platform to teach because we still had lectures that we had to wrap up at UA.
What about you, Milka? What do you use and why?
Definitely what we have seen is the popularity of the Zoom platform, which has become almost the single most important platform that we use for teaching delivery right now, but as well as our academic outreach and development work. And in some parts, we have information sharing sessions around activism. So in that way, you know, Carla extended the A's, right? I thought it was a AAA strategy where we go academic, activist, artist, and she said alchemist. In fact, the real challenge we have now is not really the use of the platform, but the skill set is how do we recruit? How do we develop interest for people to participate? Because I've been to amazing webinars where I communicate with 200 youth throughout the region on issues of education and development, and then others which are very serious issues but have two persons inside of the room. So managing it, issues of Zoom fatigue, which have come up. These are the type of conversations we have on making this a very relevant tool. But it is here now, and we can't look back. We can't look back and say that was better. We have to work with this.
No, I like the fact of you talking about not being able to look back, Amilcar, and I'll speak to you specifically because I saw you talk about use digital engagement for academia. And I say that saying, to almost quote you, this is how we talk about books. We talk about books like we sell in short drops and bus tickets in Curep Junction. I saw you on digital media advertising hard copy books that looks as though they got a beating. How do you jump from one to the other or use the current platform to send people back to look for things?
Oh yes, I mean, at the end of the day, we all have personalities, and I always like to sneeze with a little bit of dust in my book. You know, I am somebody, as you could see, who loves the life of books. At the same time, I don't think it was ever either or, but rather both and. I cannot ignore the role of technology when I think about students, right? That this could, one investment in a serious laptop, and that could be supported by the private sector, the NGO sector, and definitely the state. A strong laptop, national widespread access to Wi-Fi, and really the idea that information is a public good could reduce the cost of transportation. It forces us to think about social. Being social, what does collective action look like in a digital space? To do meetings, yes, but also for students and activists to build collectives. The best thing we have seen, I love books, but there has been an interesting moment in Caribbean literature right now, where we have had Caribbean Literature Day on July 12th. But also, we have seen the use of videos to communicate and share our work and create publics and create audiences. That is where I think our future is. And the last point, if I may, because I don't want to take up time here, DK, is that we're rethinking the idea that university was in a special domain of a few persons. And even though the government has invested in big programs for people to go into, we went primary school, secondary school, and we didn't go tertiary school. We went college or university. And that means now if the cost of the teacher, the big professor in front of the class, is not the value proposal, we could really rethink the cost of education itself and we teach really to mentor and to audit, and but we could give education free as public goods with YouTube videos for all people to access.
Now, Carla, I hear you nodding, and I don't know if I heard an amen as well, but what's your take on it?
No, I agree with him. I think that we are ideally positioned to shift some things that have existed for a long time and that have been exclusionary. The fact that we have been forced online, which there are universities that have been trying to move online for years that had to get it done in a 6-week period because of COVID-19. So the fact that we have moved online actually changes a lot in terms of who we can give access to and what we can give access to. And I love that Amilcar says we're teaching to mentor and we're teaching to audit, because one of the issues that we're finding in academia is there's a love for teaching that is a love for learning that is diminishing, right? Some of that has to do with the over testing of our students. They don't actually love to learn. And so then you as a lecturer kind of have to find a way to make them want to get the information. At the same time, there are people out there who want this information but cannot get it because they cannot afford to get into the university. The one, I think, issue that we will have to deal with is some of the same people who could not afford to matriculate into the university also do not have access to Wi-Fi, also do not have access to a computer, also maybe are not as digitally literate. So again, they might be left behind. But like, no, if we want the revolution could be here and it could happen online.
Now, I want to take a break, but when we come back from the break, I want to speak about the system is one thing, but how do we look at self and how do we need to treat with self moving forward? But we pose those questions when we return. Stay with us. We are talking about Policing My Space, the digital edition. Welcome back. We are speaking about navigating digital spaces at this point in time with Carla Moore and Amilcar Sinachan. Now, Carla, I want to start with you, please. You spoke about, well, both of you spoke to changes in system, but I want to start with you, please, Carla, about changes in self. Do we need to look at ourselves a little differently in how it is we treat with some of these things? Because I'll quote two instances where you may be online. At one point, you start off, greetings and salutations. This is Carla Moore from More Talk JA, and you're going at a pace because you have one target market, one audience, at least in mind. But there have been other situations where your delivery is different, your content may be a little different. So how do you navigate that space within yourself, even outside of the system?
That's a great question. I think as we move into the online space, a lot of the practices that we used to use offline will need to come there. So as we move online, and you said it, now online is like people's backyard. It's kind of like you're in people's living room. It's for us to also recognize that now I'm in my living room, I'm in my office, I am in my church, I am at lunch with my boss. All of this is happening in the same space. What is the scaling that I need to do? And I think one of the things that probably used to happen to us before is we didn't used to do that scaling. So it's either I'm online and it's fun and jokes with my friends, so I say anything that I feel like, or I'm online and it's a business profile, and so I have to be, completely straight-laced. But now so many spaces are opening and they're overlapping that it's necessary for us to consider that. And I think it's necessary for the people who are viewing us online to also consider that you are looking at us in a way that you wouldn't have had access to us. Some of the conversations that would have been happening offline are now happening where you can see them or overhear them. So to be mindful and I guess a little bit less judgmental of what you're encountering, because we're grappling with this in a way that we've never had to before. But it's definitely about that scaling and of understanding your whole life is on here now, or 95% of your life is on here now. Some of the techniques you had from offline, you're going to have to carry them.
What about you, Amilcar, in terms of that? If somebody does a Google search, they could see you singing a song or Ode to Bunjigan and find it. Eventually they will see this conversation. How do you say, okay, well, this is me, this is also me, and connect those two?
I don't know if we should take TK off national television or give him an award for the backup work he always does. But to the idea, I think you raise where this could be rocky. For example, I am optimistic about the potential of technology to transform education, but also to think about the questions of class and how we could make this as a device for working class liberation in the Caribbean to get more people across, right? But there are issues, for example. There's a real concern for some professors, some lecturers who have ideological positions, like myself as a socialist, where I may be asked to record a video and put it online. And then the type of extempo and the ad libs a professor might make in a class, and I'm not trying to protect a certain type of prejudicial speech, but it could be taken outside of the context of the classroom and used to impact their career because of principled views around justice and so on, where people raise questions or get proof on the conservative side that these people are too ideological. This is the brainwashing that happens in the classroom. So there's a way we need to build a code of conduct, but not to, what it would govern people in a very rigid way, but to have very clear expectations on what is the quality of interaction in the online sphere, but why it must also be a liberating politics where people, at one hand, have a core set of principles and conduct where we guarantee the rights of all people, but also we don't censor persons and allow them the latitude to express their views, even their mistakes, even their shortcomings, because the classroom is a safe space for ideas and their development. I don't want the online to be a permanent register of, of views that are growing.
So in terms of that classroom being a safe space, it begs the question, what is the classroom? What is the office? Especially since those lines are progressively becoming more and more tenuous.
I think that there's a very specific thing, if I may add, Dike, and I'll give Carla to give her example. But the question is, what is a home? What is a learning environment for me? I could answer your question, but I am talking about sitting down with final year students doing a presentation, baby balling, somebody cussing out for roti, all of that in one of the most important assessments of the student's life. So it is our job as a geographer, I would say, the spatial realities of these young people and students who are on the receiving end of education. We need to account for the fact that not all persons may have a certain middle class, bourgeois, socio-spatial environment that enables a bourgeois delivery of education.
Carla?
I think that in the university, one of the things that we advocate around is to move towards interdisciplinarity and actually to move towards collapsing the boundaries between disciplines, because in a way it's not real, it's socially constructed. All these differences between disciplines actually just convinces each of us that we're a specialist, a snowflake, and we're the only person that can do what we want to do. So if you actually want people to learn about life the way life plays out, then there's a lot of collapsing and hybridity that needs to happen. And I feel that's actually the thing that needs to happen here, is we need to recognize that people's lives have collapsed in on each other. And so what we expected is not going to exist anymore. And a good amount of that for me is being compassionate. It's being compassionate. So when the picnic start ball in the presentation, you're going to allow for that. When your students are online cussing you, because that's the other thing we have to deal with, right? They're online cussing you, and previously they would have been cussing under the tree, but now they're doing it out there. What do you do when you see that? When the university recognizes, or not even universities, but employers are looking for who to hire, when you're going online and you're scrolling a person's social media, recognize that you are now in their living room. So I think there's a lot of compassion that we need to exercise with each other, and also a far less judgmental tone. If you're looking at a lecturer to know if they're effective, it's not about, oh, what have they said to the students in these conversations where the lecturer is now wearing the hat as advocate. Are the students coming out with the grades? Are they understanding the information? Well, perhaps you need to look at what is happening and how it works rather than being prescriptive about what you think should work.
But Carla, in terms of looking at intersectionality, liminality, where do we draw lines? And I say that with interacting with students. I say that as interacting with employers, because sometimes the idea of working remotely can lend people to believe that it is okay to get you at any hour because you're working remotely.
Absolutely. So for me, when it comes on to that type of interaction with students and liminality, one of the things for me is very key. I try not to follow any of my students online until I am done teaching them. I can't control whether or not they follow me because my thing is public. I try to try to minimize that. Also, anything that has to be done officially that is regarding your education, that's an email. That's not going to be you messaging me on IG. But I think most lecturers have an idea of what is acceptable in the real world, and it may not be that difficult for you to translate it outside. For you as a worker, it's also about remembering that you would have had boundaries at work. If you were sitting at your desk, it would not have been okay for your boss to come and knock on your door every 5 minutes. You would not be able to get anything done. So it's also about you advocating for yourself and reminding your boss that, listen, I really do actually need the time to get things done. I can't constantly be answering an email from you. Where this becomes even more challenging is when we think about women's time and the idea that women's time is elastic. So you can just keep piling more things onto women for them to do, and somehow they're going to make it stretch, which is where I think some sensitization needs to happen with employers, that because somebody is at home, it doesn't mean that they have more time. You've cut off the travel time. But the other things that they have to be doing while they're doing their work have actually increased. So what is the concession you're making there for the fact that we're all in a less than ideal situation?
And I'll ask you that as well, Amilcar. Is it that you don't like people to see people have blue ticks, or you see seen, so you realize, okay, well, they've gotten the message, but you don't necessarily get that response from them? How do you set boundaries?
Well, I mean, not everybody could do what I've privately done, which is develop a very serious reputation for responding within 9 months. You know what I mean? I treat WhatsApp like childbirth. You know, we have to take this thing seriously and do that. But it's an issue of access, you know, and we can't stop students from writing me an email like a text message. All I could do at the beginning of the semester is in my opening slides, give them a template of how we relate to each other, and then I email them the template when they seem to not to live up to those expectations. I can't stop them from messaging me on Instagram. What I cannot do is respond to it there and then create a privileged form of access, which is outside of the formal route. I think the fundamental challenge is for the trade unions, to what Carla was speaking about, to really have a conversation much more deeply about workers. You have people who are always on call and people who have never been on call in their lives, really in a certain type of relationship where call is a function, but not really the job. And then we also have this idea of WhatsApp. Then how do we write WhatsApp to our superiors? How do we write it to our workmates? What are the expectations if they don't reply? What is the meaning of a blue tick? Is that a form of negligence on the job? Or are we only accountable to phone calls which happen within certain hours? When women now, especially mothers, take the opportunity to drop their children to school and pick them up at 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., did you expect them to be present at a desk or to be available to hear a request and work? So these are the way that we need to really think through the day, but also the workload, which there are high times of workload, which are unreasonable, but there are also very low times, and people think they naturally balance out each other. I think otherwise, and we need to have deeper conversations as this go along, as a workers issue, as a labor issue, for the employer as well as the employee.
And we want to thank you for planting some of those seeds, because as per usual, we have more questions and answers, and time is not elastic and it's run out on us. But thank you very much, Carla Moore. Thank you very much, Amilcar Sanatan. And we want to thank you for tuning in.